You want to move on to the
which is
much
larger issue.
A much larger issue, a much more difficult issue, much more uncomfortable issue. This is the James Robinson Airboy debacle.
And I will say I read his apology and then I read the comic, and I think he did a good job of really grasping what was wrong with it.
Let's start out with some real basic stuff. I'm not going to go into the history of Airboy or anything, but I just want to say that I was loving this comic.
Absolutely.
I loved the first issue. I loved it. I mostly liked the second issue. Where this comic went with the transphobia, I feel was a little much.
Mm-hmm. I feel it was more than a little much.
When I initially heard the outrage and I was looking at some of the criticisms, I thought this might have been a 1 or 2 panel off joke.
It's like 5 or 6 pages.
It's the last third of the book.
It's really extended, and it's really excessive.
It's quite pornographic, and the whole point of it basically is, isn't it funny somebody is getting blown by somebody who is transgender or transvestite? Like, there's no line separating that either.
And I'm quoting here, he refers to, the character in the comic refers to trannies, drag queens, and I believe transvestites, all kind of as interchangeable.
Yes. Now, the defense James has of this is that he is actually writing a particularly douchebag version of himself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's autobiographical in the extent that this is before James was sober. A lot of this book reads like, Hunter S. Thompson.
It's really intense.
It's really intense with the debauchery. The problem with how he uses these individuals is that
they're shown as the pinnacle of debauchery. Airboy, it's metatextual. Airboy, it's impossible to tell if this Airboy who comes to visit is a hallucination or not. The whole thing is like Airboy's talking about, well, the Nazis won because this world is dirty and horrible and crude.
I loved all that aspect of this book.
But then they go to a bar and there are transgender people there, and that narrative is continued, and
right.
And transgender people are basically made to seem like that's the last straw. I mean, Airboy comes storming out of the bathroom stall after getting blown very graphically by a transgender woman, and
you never see their faces.
Yes, and goes, that woman had a penis, and that's not okay.
No.
And that's the last straw that makes him transport them to his world.
Do you think it would have been better if, because that's not out of character for, Airboy, who is a Golden Age character.
I think it's out of character for Airboy to randomly get a blowjob.
That's what I was thinking.
It seemed very cheap and kind of slapstick. Oh, isn't it funny that James is getting one and Airboy's right next to him?
Yeah. But they're trying to draw that Tyler Durden line. You don't know if Airboy's actually even real or if he's there or if they're imagining their Airboy. So,
but again, you don't need to use the transgender women to get that point across.
Well, here's the litmus test for me when I was reading this.
Yeah.
I sat there and went,
this is important.
Can I take this out of the story without losing anything of the story?
100% yes.
Yes, you can take it out.
And in my estimation, you can take it out and it would actually have made it better.
It probably would have made it tighter. Because even if we didn't have these issues about the transphobia in the social way, I felt that it was kind of like this weird stopping point in the story. It didn't flow as well past this point.
It didn't flow well. It seemed like it was designed to make you uncomfortable. And it was a little designed to be like, look at how bad it's gotten. It felt a little artificial to me.
And there are plenty of other ways that you can depict the social decay of America.
Transgender people are not an indicator of social decay. If anything, it's an indicator of social expansiveness.
I mean, if I was rewrite, we want to do rewrite segments. I would kind of have it be like, imagine if Airboy was confronted with a bunch of things simultaneously and kind of had this nervous breakdown in some way. He simultaneously watched UFC in a TV through a store window while some guy was shooting up in a corner across the street and cops beat somebody. He would see these 3 or 4 things, and that is what makes him snap.
There are ways to do it with violence, I think, that make more sense to that character. You don't have to, and again, I'm going to say it again because this one really is, you really don't have to punch down.
Yeah, and it is punching down.
James talks about that in his apology. He's like, I realized that it was punching down, and as much as I was trying to use it as an illustration of the character that I was creating being a bad person at the time, like, I really don't need to take a shit on a population that has more than enough crap to deal with. It's
true.
I feel that's fair.
I think it's absolutely fair. I read James's apology.
I thought it was good.
James is somebody I've had immense respect for as a craftsman, as a writer. He is phenomenally good. His apology was dead on. I felt it was completely sincere. I applaud him in every way. One of the other issues I have with this is that what we're not talking about here, and of course, because this was so fucked up, we're going to miss something about this book. And I feel bad for James because he's not going to get a certain amount of credit, and maybe this is fair. Maybe it's justice. For what he has done in this book with this autobiographical account of him at his worst and showing everybody in the world his worst side, his demons, his fears, his cowardly, cruel ways. I think he's been monumentally brave as a writer to put this book out.
And we're talking about, in terms of the story, sectioning off.
Yeah.
The transphobia, because as we said, you can lift it bodily out of the text, and the text survives.
Yes, and if you were to do that, you would see
You'd have a better story
that is just
beautiful.
I mean, it's beautiful in its own way, and the fact that he is so uncompromisingly telling you what he's afraid of as a writer, and what he's afraid of from you fans. Mm-hmm. Like I was blown, like that. Like I said, that first issue blew me away with what he was saying.
And I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this. I thought, and I'm gonna point to a scene in the first book, the job of the debauchery a little better and didn't punch down as much.
And it was funnier.
It was funny.
He's basically leading the artist through a night of William Burroughs, Hunter S. Thompson.
And you see this woman from a distance, and she looks kind of voluptuous, and the artist, I can't remember his name, the artist on the comic is like, well, like, please don't talk to her. And James is like, not everyone wants to be alone. And then you turn the page from this kind of soulful moment, and they're double teaming her on a fucking desk.
And she looks bored as hell.
The problem is that she's depicted as kind of fat and ugly.
I didn't get the ugly part. I didn't think
she just looks kind of irritated.
She looks kind of irritated.
But there's a certain amount of grotesqueness about it.
Yes.
I think it's equally distributed among the three participants in terms of the art.
Yeah. Also, I mean, you got to remember, like, the panels following that, which is like the morning after. Both the males are depicted as kind of grotesque in their own right, with their, is explicit with their flaccid, like, spent dicks, just like, and their horrible, horrible out of shape bodies. I thought it was fair.
Yeah. So what I look at that as kind of like a transmet moment.
Yes. There are elements that actually kind of remind me of Warren Ellis' early work.
I wasn't particularly offended by it as a woman. I thought it kind of nailed the right note it needed to nail, and by giving her a little bit of personality, she wasn't just like in ecstasy. She was a little like, I've had better.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's why it's happening. She's like, this is all right, I guess.
Like, the only one who seemed to be enjoying himself in that splash page was James.
And he has his head thrown back in like this sublime moment, and she's like, eh.
And he's buried under her, and he can't see.
Yeah, it's just
that right now is a nominee for Splash Page of the Year, as far as I'm concerned.
So while that's not perfect, and I'm sure the feminists are going to fucking rage on and on about that, and I can see why they would. I'm just saying, I had less of a problem with that, and I feel like it does the work that whole, like, kind of uncomfortable spread about trans women should have done.
Yeah.
No, I phrased that wrong. That scene carries the load that shouldn't have been distributed onto the backs of these characters.
You could have just had Airboy discovering things on the internet as a plot device, like
porn.
You wouldn't have to show it.
I do appreciate them giving him a pot brownie. I thought that was funny.
That was great.
But yeah, like, the pot brownie is like, and there's a lead up to it, and I knew where this was going. Because being a queer in the Bay Area, they go to Dolores Park.
Yes.
Where all the fucking queers hang out. And, there's a pot brownie, and I'm like, now they're gonna go to a bar, and like something's gonna happen with a queer character or something like that. Like, you know where it's going.
So you were able to predict that?
Yes, because it's tropey. You're like, oh, they're going into the opium den now. Like, they're in the land of sin, and that's the problem. The problem is coupling the sinfulness and the vice and the shame and the dirtiness of the world with trans characters, and that's just not okay. And I'm not putting his head on a stake for that. I'm just saying it's not okay. I'm critiquing it as a piece of work, and I'm saying it was a misstep.
Yeah, absolutely a misstep. And the fact that he was like
receptive
and was like, see, I don't think his apology seemed fake to me. I think he was kind of like, you're right. You're right.
Like, I messed up. And I think that's fair. And for me, at least, for me as a reader, I'm not trans, so I don't have much to say on it. Beyond that, I'm satisfied. It's up to trans people to say if that's satisfying for them.
And one of the problems we have, though, is that if the last 2 years have shown us anything, it's like this kind of outrage does not breed forgiveness. A lot of people who once get on a shit list stay on that shit list. A la Mark Miller or Rick Remender. There are people to this day, even though they were wrong.
But if you...
like, I'd never read a Rick Remender book.
No, but if you notice, those issues are ones that the straight, white, cis feminists have more of a problem with. I'm seeing a lot more people who are like, thank you, to his apology.
Yeah, well,
A lot of trans people are like, thank you. Not that you have to. Like, just because someone apologizes doesn't mean you have to be like, yay! It doesn't mean you burn them at the stake, but it doesn't mean that you're like, oh, thank you so much.
But that's what we want, right?
But I'm seeing a lot more dialogue.
We want creators to be bold enough to make mistakes and to put stuff out there that's challenging, confrontational, like if that's what they want to do. This is what I mean about taboos. I don't want to have taboos in art. And James put something out there that was questionable and had problems, and
it got critiqued.
And it got critiqued. And most of the critiques I saw about Airboy were really good.
Yeah.
Like showing exactly why it was wrong. It wasn't inflammatory. It didn't call attention to the critique itself, right, as being clever. And this is the dialogue we want out of this.
Well, I think it speaks to the audience for a book like this. It's not going to be the people who are reading, Daredevil or Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's true.
Or the mainstream shit. It's not the fucking Marvel movie feminist fans. It's kind of the weird.
It's the indie fans.
It's the weirdos. It is the queers. It is the trans people. It is the people who are searching for content that mirrors our own experiences. And then you come across this, and you're like, oh shit.
It's the people who've read Ghost World and Funtown and Strangers in Paradise.
I love that he takes a shit on Daniel Close. I think it's hilarious.
Great. While taking a lot of shits on DC editorial as well.
Oh yeah, which is totally...
Burn that bridge, James. Burn it.
Burn it to the ground. Dear Dan Didio. But yeah, I think there are a lot of really awesome and beautiful things about this, and then there's a moment that was a fuck up.
Yep. And when you get serial narratives, that happens.
I will continue to read this comic.
I'm actually even more interested now because of the fuck up.
I'm curious to see if that informs the writing for the better, because James seems like someone who would take a moment like this and learn from it and actually make his art better.
Which is what a real writer does.
Not safer, but better.
Right. And if he can get himself out of this kind of hole,
yes,
in a sense, like I want to see him as somebody interested in the craft of writing. I want to see how he does this.
Yeah, me too.
Does he ignore it from now on? Does he add something to put it in a better light? I mean, will we see a trans character down the line?
Maybe,
I mean, it's entirely possible, right? Turns out Valkyrie is trans. If you know Airboy, you know what that means. But
I think it's not the responsibility of every trans fan who has read this to be like, I'm going to stick with it. I'm just saying I plan to. That's all. I
would also say, like I said in the beginning, this book is really good.
It is.
Like, this was a hiccup, and this was a problem, and this was bad.
It's a major problem.
But it's a really good book,
other than that. Yeah.
Like, I really love this book.
It's not easily dismissible.
No, and it shouldn't be. Like, honestly, you can kind of dismiss Justice League 3001 in a certain way. Like, you don't need to read that book.
No.
Like,
if it goes south and it's just like, guy has a vagina, I'm just going to be like, ugh, and put it down.
I would recommend Airboy.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
I would be like, you should read this. This is interesting.
It has potential to do some really interesting stuff.
There is I like both things, but there's absolutely a difference between entertainment and art, right? Like, sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're wildly different, but One is definitely entertainment. One is definitely art.
So to me, I think it's the moment itself in terms of taking a chance, fucking it up, listening to people, learning from it, and then, potentially doing better is great. And I think folks who are scared to try things in art can take a look at what he did and how he responded to critique and learn how you should do things. Also
learn how you should critique things. Absolutely. Like I said, it is night and day, not only the books, but the people who are critiquing things. Like, this is the model you should follow, not what we're seeing with some of the Justice League 3001 stuff. But at the same time, it's like what you were saying. Who is reading which book, right?
And this is not to say that this is respectability politics here. We're not saying you have to, be, quote, that lovely word that everyone uses as code. You don't have to be articulate about it. But
we're not. I wouldn't even classify us as particularly articulate.
I just went off on a huge fucking rant about Warner Brothers using sexualized language and all that stuff, and I still say suck my dick to them. You don't have to have an academic critique. I do think you do need to be like, I have a problem with this, and here's why. You have to tell someone here's why. And I don't actually agree with 100% of the time burning it the fuck down.
No, there are very few cases of that.
Anger and hurt are justifiable, but if you want to get something changed, you have to at least tell the person what is wrong with it.
You have to be able to talk to not only the creator, but say the fans of the creator in a way that they're going to understand. See, one of the things
that's not saying academic language. You just have to find a way to communicate.
One of the things that's lost in this is how we basically have critiques that are just as divisive as some of the works we're seeing, right?
I'm reading critiques by people who don't read the material that they're critiquing, and that's what I'm talking about.
But at the same time, they're doing it to basically fan the flames of the people that already agree with them, not necessarily to change the minds of the people that don't agree with them.
Or to even have a dialogue with the creator.
And for me, that's what is missing. It's like the whole point is you want that creator to do better, and you want the people who might support that creator to maybe see things from your point of view. You can't get that across if you're saying what you're doing is an assault.
That's just going to turn people off, and you're not actually going to get the result that you want.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are of my persuasion, right? Straight white males who are on the fence on a lot of things. We don't have all the information, but when we see somebody come at us, it's our natural instincts to often push it away, to react against it, and to basically go, well, fuck you.
That's not to say that everything that people do has to cater to you guys.
Right.
But it's pointing out a side effect that does happen.
But if you want to achieve an effect, like if what you want is for...
If you're hurt and you want to yell about it, that's your aim for this particular thing, fine. Like, people pop off about stuff all the time. You don't have to be...
Yeah, we did it here.
You don't have to be flawless. Like, and, there are, when you run out in the world and you're worried potentially about someone finding out that you're trans at your job and getting fired, or your landlord finding out that you're trans and kicking you out of your house, or you don't have a home, or you're in sex work, and you happen to then, and I'm not blaming Jeff for this, but you happen to then read a comic and be like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Maybe someone's going to go on the internet and be like, you know what? Fuck you, buddy. And
right,
that's
sure.
Totally fair.
Sure, absolutely. I mean,
no one's going to be flawless all the time.
There's no easy answer in any of this. That's kind of what I'm saying.
But I would say more the people who have the space and the privilege and the spoons to do it need to up the ante and have a better dialogue.
Absolutely.
I feel like in talking about certain queer issues, I have a fucking responsibility to do better. Yeah. Because I have the space and the time to do so.
Well, I think when it comes to all these issues, we all should do better. I mean, people, like I said, the white males like myself need to do a much better job of listening and less of a job of reacting. Like, that's our problem. Is like, whenever we are challenged, we're just like, well, screw you. Like, I just want my Jimmy Olsen white. What's wrong with that? He's always been white.
Which is super helpful.
Fucking pointless. But, I think they're all just uncomfortable that the guy who's playing Jimmy Olsen in Supergirl.
Very attractive.
Very attractive man. I think it's making a lot of men feel uncomfortable about themselves.
He should, because I'm like, if it was anyone else, I wouldn't call you James, but I'll call you James.
I'll call you James.
He's a good-looking dude.
He is a very good-looking dude, and I am not afraid to say it.
I think he's a good choice for the character. Like, I think he's going to add some...
With what they're going with on that? Yeah, I get it.
He's a little more grown up, but he's still got that, sparkle. that Jimmy has. I would just say again, like, I'm not particularly calling anyone out, and I'm careful about what I say about certain things because it's not
unless it's Warner Brothers or Assassin's
Fuck
Creed.
Warner Brothers. But in terms of trans issues, I'm not trans. I can only speak so much. I support people in having dialogues and critiquing and pointing out ways in which media can just like kind of take a shit on you.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true.
But I remain skeptical about certain aspects of call-out culture, and certain aspects of call-out culture, ironically, happen to be the people with the most privilege.
Yes.
Most of the time, the people who scream the loudest are the ones who aren't really concerned with the issue at hand.
No.
They just want to hear themselves talk.
Well, it's their job.
And then they drown out legitimate conversation. And that's the problem I have with some of this stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, some of the critiques of that Justice League were just so divisive and angry that it's hard to really get a handle on what the issue is. Like, for instance, we didn't talk about this, but I don't understand, is the issue with the Superman character saying it's basically a woman?
It's unclear.
Or is it the issue with Batman, who is basically saying, no, it's still a guy? Like, both of those points of view are both problematic, right? Because in the end, who is more open-minded? Well, the Superman character, actually.
The issue raised by that article is that Guy doesn't get a chance to advocate for themselves in the comic, which is fair. And the one that I thought was fucking pedantic is Batman doesn't stand up enough. And,
really?
And fully call out the transphobic language, and I'm like, Batman wouldn't, period. So that argument is invalid.
It's not. Also, it's not actually Batman. And how many panels
but
of
Batman wouldn't.
How many panels of it do you need? Because he goes on for like it's a good 6-7 panels.
And then Batman's like, he's basically like, you're a douchebag.
Yeah, and that's the bottom line. Like,
he tries to explain it to him, and then just gets so frustrated that
he gives
he's
up.
not getting it that he gives up. To me, it feels authentic to the character that I think they're trying to build.
And so you're also saying you want like two basically white cis males to have an elaborate discussion over something they're not.
That feels very artificial to me and very imposed, and I don't appreciate that kind of policing.
And maybe down the line they have plans for Wonder Woman having an issue with his, and maybe she will speak out about it.
That would be a great.
Like, that's how I would write it.
That would be a great character to bring that up.
It's the perfect character.
Or the Flash, who is female,
who is also female, and she's got Barry's DNA.
Yeah, she could be like, look, I
did this first.
I had to come to terms with this. I still haven't come to terms with this. You use the pronouns I want you to fucking use, and that's the end of it. And Superman's going to be like, but I'm boning you.
Right.
It's different.
Right. Oh, we forgot to mention that he actually is banging the gender-swapped Flash.
Yep.
So,
which is awesome. I mean, really, as in Multiversity, it should be Barry and Hal, but
always.
That's okay.
Always.
We'll let that go for now.